YouTube page. So just be wary of that when you are speaking. So let's go live now, Mark.
Yep.
Ka haia te ata, ka hapara te ata, ka koroki te manu, ka wairori te kutu, ko te atanui ka horaina, ka taki te umere, he po, he ao ka awatea. Welcome everybody to our board meeting this morning. It's great to have everybody back here in person. It seems like a long time since we've been here for a meeting. So we'll start first slide on the agenda with apologies, and there are none because everybody's here. Declarations.
I may have to leave early depending on what time we finish. Okay. I'll need to leave just after 11.
Okay. We'll note that.
Hopefully we'll
do something about
conflict of interest.
Right. So I've got one of them as well. My one is item 8. The Sticks Living Laboratory Field Centre. So I'm going to step down from the chair for that one, and Simon will take over. And Emma,
the discretionary funding.
So that's item 11. With Residents Association application.
Yeah, that's right. I'll just note that I live on one of the streets affected by these low speed zone. I've checked that it's not a conflict, but
thanks for noting that as well. Item 3, confirmation of previous minutes.
Happy to move.
Pauline's moving it, Ellie's seconding. Put that motion, all those in favour? That's carried. Public forum.
Oh, sorry. Just a typo in the minutes on.
chocolate fish coming.
Sorry, I know, we can't afford them either. Page 14. So Springfield Road request from last meeting was discussed in regard to lack of pedestrian crossings and related safety concerns at the corner with Rutland. Now Springfield and Rutland don't join. So were you talking about, I know you've worked, so was it the intersection with Rutland and St Albans, or the intersection of Springfield and St Albans?
I think we went on to talk about the whole road. We started at intersection of St Albans, Springfield, and then we worked all our way down to Beeley Ave.
Okay, so how about we change it to safety concerns, including the corner with Rutland? How about that? That would probably.
Well, I don't know if the corner of Rutland
is
that didn't.
No.
Okay, it was St Albans.
Springfield, St Albans.
Yeah.
One that should
Want to do that? Okay.
Yeah, but it was ended up being the whole corridor.
But also we talked about Edgware and
Yeah.
Well, that's later on.
we
That's in the next paragraph, and that's fine. Yeah.
So we'll change Rutland Street to St Albans.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll pick my chocolate fish up later.
Yeah.
Mike's fine.
We'd already voted, so I don't.
Yeah, we had that had already been.
Oh, it's just a typo, isn't it?
But Madam Chair, you're just zooming through.
Yeah, no, good. We need
Fine,
some-
it's fine. I do have to leave early.
Right, item 4. I believe everybody that's here to speak is doing a deputation. There's nobody else for public forum. No? Okay, so that moves us to item 5, deputation by appointment. I've got 4 of these today. So first up, we've got Dave Gardner wanting to speak to the slow speed neighbourhood Papanui item. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Just need to get that microphone on. Right, item 4. I believe everybody that's here to speak is doing
3 second delay, it's like radio.
Sorry, it automatically goes to starting the YouTube and start the live thing. So it's just that way.
Sorry about that.
It sounded good though.
There's a button to press the right-handed 2 buttons. Yep.
Yep, and you've got up to 10 minutes, including time for questions.
Okay, so press to turn on, then turn off. Hello, my name is Dave Gardner. Thank you for having me here. I'd just like to comment on the slow speed neighbourhood zone on Papanui. I'd like to thank you for doing this. It's very good. It's very helpful when you ride a bicycle with a child on the front. Because we ride through that area a lot. Though there is still an issue, I feel. It's good that the 40k zone has been extended to Innes Road, but the area on Rutland Street where the speed will change, if you can show the slide, please. That's currently where it's marked to go from 30 to 40, which happens right before a kindergarten, and then and then also before the cycle lane, where children on the way to the school can cross. and you see the top corner of the orange area there at the corner of Rutland and Tomes. That's also an entrance to the school. It might not be an official entrance, but the shared path goes along there. And I think that's not the best area for the 30k zone to change. I think it should be put closer to Maze Road, because if you go to the next slide, please. That's the current location of where the photo is taken from, is the current location where the speed is going to change. And in the areas circled in green is the kindergarten. So you could have lots of parents crossing the road there with their children and having cars speed up from 30 to 40, even though it's just 10 Ks, you know, they're still putting their foot on the accelerator to go faster right outside the kindergarten. So I think that should be a 30k zone still up further. Go to the next slide, please. And that area is looking north from Maze Road. You can see the cycle lane, and that looks like a sort of natural sort of a squeeze point for a slow zone to start. Because in other areas where they've had slow zones built in the city, they've added these things to make the road narrower. So I think that is a more appropriate place to people slow down before they get to the even cycle crossing there. Yeah, and it would be good if the speed could also be dropped along Papanui Road and Main North Road, because there's lots of people crossing the road there, just like Riccarton Road. It's not just Main North Road, it's also Papanui Road, where there is like around the subway, the KFC, people usually cross there a lot, and there's not that much room because they've got to cross the bus lane and then the 2 lanes of traffic as well. Yeah, and also the area where on Main North Road, just outside the school, it's good that it's a slow speed zone temporarily there, but it's not affecting the main road as well, where if you go there during the end of school, there's a lot of traffic and a lot of kids, not just on side street, but on Main North Road. Yeah.
Sorry, just clarifying which school.
St. Joseph's.
Is this at St. Joseph's?
St. Joseph's, yes. Yeah, sorry. Because there's also buses out there, and there's people wanting to turn right onto the street that takes you to the top 10 holiday. It's not top 10 holiday park anymore. And people undercut there as well, and also going southern direction when people want to turn onto the street going to that school, then cars will they'll undertake and go onto the bicycle lane. So you're heading south, you've just had 2 lanes merging into one, and you've got cyclists coming off the footpath back onto the road, because at that area you have to go onto the footpath. And then you're going back onto the road as a cyclist, and then you've got cars undertaking and pulling into the cycle lane, the painted cycle lane on the road, because someone wants to turn right there, and they just don't look because,
Because why?
They're speeding up. They're trying to speed up there, and they're trying to avoid the car in front of them who's turning right. So 50 Ks there's not enough space for the cars to slow down when a car in front of you is all of a sudden turning right, because this is right after a merge, and people are using their indicators to indicate left or right. So if they're coming from maybe the left lane to merge, indicating right, and then they're keeping it on, people might not realize. And so then the person behind them has to quickly sort of swerve to the left to undertake, and then they'll go into the bicycle lane. And so I think 50 Ks is not a good speed for that area there. And also closer to the mall where there is the Coopman's Bakery, but on the other side where there's the hairdressers at the lights, because it's very narrow for the lanes at the lights, this is heading south, sorry, where the cars are turning right, some won't be fully in the right lane, which causes the cars going straight to also cut into the bicycle lane again. And it's very nerving when you have a child on your bicycle and you're going along the bicycle lane there and a bus also comes along, because buses are very wide. And they're trying to go, maybe, they'll slow down a bit, but still going very, very fast for the space that's available there. And then you come up to all the lights along outside the mall, which is like 5 lights or so, which naturally slows down the traffic. So traffic usually in that area is already going 30 k's most of the time, except for late evenings or when the traffic's a bit lower. Yes. Oh, and I would also like to comment on the Cranford Street changes, the no parking. Sorry, I didn't mention that. I only noticed it in the PDF. I'd like to say I approve of the parking disappearing from outside the new petrol station that's there, the Cranford mowers, because as the cyclists going along there, a lot of cars just stop in the driveway and they're not even looking left, and because they're trying to look right, but the cars are blocking it. And I think, though, it should be extended outside placemakers as well, because down lower, the northernmost exit of placemakers is lower than where the cars are parked on the street, which also blocks their sight. So it can cause some people to just stay in the cycle lane there and not looking left. And I also approve of removing the fence outside Cranford mowers. But I'd like to check if the vegetation there will also be removed, or have something that does not grow very tall at all. Because if vegetation is left there, it will eventually grow up and be not maintained. So then it'll also block the site again. Because I noticed the vegetation was taken away from placemakers, the northernmost exit, and that's helped quite a bit there. I don't know if I can mention the pub usually leaves their sign on the shared path as well, taking up some space.
Great, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Pauline.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and talking to us. It's really good. So with the Main North Road one, are you suggesting 40 or 30?
30 would keep it in line with other areas like Ricketton Road.
Yeah, and then are you suggesting possibly that it runs from all the way from say Couplands?
Before Couplands.
Yeah, but from there coming back down right round to Papanui Road and down.
Yes.
All that way.
Yes.
And we just figure out where to finish that 30k
Yeah.
on Papanui Road.
Yeah. Until at least Lies Road.
Well, yeah.
Because that's where sort of the shops sort of end.
Yeah.
Because you've got a petrol station there. So.
Thanks.
Kelly?
I just, good to see you, Dave. We've been emailing a bit. I have got a pretty concise response from staff about some of the issues that Dave's raising. Not dismissing you raising them, it's great that you still do, Dave, but what I will do is forward the response to the entire board. Mike also responded a bit to this. It's with regards to the work that was done on Ricketton Road. I don't know whether I've already sent this to you guys, the work that was done on Ricketton Road, which is an infrastructural issue, which is costly and so forth. But just to give some context from a council perspective to the issues that you're raising, I'll forward it to the board.
Staff, when they present this report, will speak to when we hear from the deputations as well. Mike, last one.
Thank you, Dave. Just the law that you're talking about up by Cranford Street, Main North Road. Is there an issue having to actually go off the road onto the footpath and back onto the road? Like if it was designed better, if possible, to actually allow you to stay on the road, would you think that would actually help?
Originally it was like that.
Yeah.
The merging of the double lane was not so far down. It sort of merged right after the lights when you're heading south. But then they extended that and they pushed the cyclists onto the footpath. when that footpath was never really designed for cyclists, as it's very bumpy as well. And the angle you have to sort of go onto it is sort of, what I would prefer is like a shared cycle pedestrian path along there. But that costs a lot of money to do. So it was originally the cyclists could go fully along, but then they changed it.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate your thoughts and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Next, we will move on to Susan Peake, who is also going to speak to us on that same report. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. That's without glasses. Kia ora koutou. It's lovely to be here and back in this building. I was just looking up at Yvonne Palmer's name there and thinking that she was really involved with the Living Streets. Have people all seen this many years ago? I live in Grants Road and I've been there for just over 30 years. And having a look back through this, when the street was really wide and it's been subsequently narrowed, and a lot of money spent on it because it was full of junk in the road, etc. What's I going to say? Oh, no.
And it's much better now, is that what you were going to say?
Yes and no. The increase in traffic, the infill in housing had a huge, made a huge change on it. I noticed that there's a lot more rat running because if you come through Springfield Road, Rutland Street, Rayburn Ave, Mary, or Grasmere Street now because of the lights, you can do away with going through 11 lights rather than going down Papanui Road, etc. to get to the city. That's from Grasmere Street to Billy Ave. 11 lights, that's a lot of people. So we get a lot more rat running. But I was just thinking about what Dave said about changing, sorry Dave, about changing the speed zone at Mays Road. I'm not sure that that's such a great idea because people coming from the city, especially at night, come through there, they cut through down Mays Road and they go onto Cranford Street. So to me, going from 40 to 30 at that point, maybe it should be lowered back down another stage. I was just thinking about that. But I have done a wee diagram because I'm not into PowerPoints, having retired. I was going to say I used to call them wanky PowerPoints.
You did say it.
Weird way of saying a lot when you're older. This is the Gambier, Rayburn and Grants Road intersection, and it's a mess. And people don't know where to give way to. And I don't know either, to be perfectly honest. That's me. I live just down between Mary Street and Gambier Street. I'm coming straight down here, going straight down to Papanui Road, turning left. And it was Yvonne Palmer who had originally suggested that having that crooked intersection between Grants Road and Blythe Road so that it wouldn't become a rat running thing through to Greers Road, Blythe Road, Greers Road, so and then become a feeder street. So if I'm coming through here, I notice that there are only give-way signs. No, there aren't give-way signs, and that's probably problematic. There are speed hump signs saying 20. And people coming from the city end up Rayburn Ave will virtually almost stop. And I'm still coming down here. I don't have a great speed because I'm come from home.
This is helpful, might be helpful for you too.
Oh, yes. It's much better.
That's fine.
No, I like that. Okay, so where that car is, they virtually stop.
That's me.
And then they'll start again. And so I'm going straight ahead. They need to give way. I toot and I get very rude signs and grumpy looking faces. Also, coming from the other end from Gambier Street, if they're going down Rayburn Ave, and the car in Rayburn Ave is going up Gambier Street, that's fine because they bypass each other. But if you've got a car going straight through either way, it confuses things and they don't know who to give way to. And I don't either. So because both cars are doing a slight right turn, who gives way?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea, and you'll know about the living streets, was that everybody just worked together. You didn't have traffic lights or give way signs and things like that. And I know that we did put a give way in a few years ago. Was it Proctor or somewhere? One of those has got a give way sign now through there. Yeah, and I brought that up at the time, but the whole idea of the living streets was you didn't have signs that just people went slowly and shared the road, and they look really nice like this. But I mean, like you're saying, probably you've noticed an increase in the car numbers. So that may be why people are not, it's not functioning perhaps as it was designed to do in a quiet zone. So are you seeking either signs, or are you seeking to more deter the traffic from going through somehow?
Both. Because Emma will know this, I'm really worried about the Cranford Renewal Basin and how that's going to impact on Grants Road. And I suspect Grants Road will become a feeder road. And already with the infill housing, rented places, the changes in building requirements where people don't have to have garages. And I mentioned in my submission that number 70 have 3 townhouses of 3 bedrooms each, single garages, and tradies they're rented. And everybody seems to have at least 3 cars. And so they park on the streets. And now traffic is having to stop virtually outside my place to give way because of the width of the cars and the narrowness of the street.
Yeah. So, could I suggest that we look at requesting staff to do an area plan for the traffic management around here, and bearing in mind your comments around the future development in Cranford Basin and the effect that's going to have?
Yeah, so that's obviously a separate thing to the slow speed. Yeah.
Yes, but from a deputation we can make
Make a resolution.
But normally it's when they've left the table.
So bring up the information exchange.
Can we can't make resolutions on that?
You can take action.
Yeah.
Information exchange, you can take action, so we can seek further information.
Shall we do it then? That's fine.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Susan? Or did you have anything else to add?
I don't think so, because I could probably rip it on.
And that's all
I hope that was relatively succinct. It's great.
Yes. Just you are supportive of the speed.
Absolutely, and I suspect that if it's not to 30, people go 40, etc. And I think in my submission, which I was a bit surprised that they were reported verbatim with our names by them in that submission. You know, we were the 84 submissions. I didn't realise that our names would be put there across. I could have probably done a better.
You'll know for next time. Oh, you could have added a picture.
I probably wouldn't know how to put it on for them, but there was one man who was very rude about the community board. That did bring a smile.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do the submission and for coming on today. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Fiona Bennett, you're up next. And yeah, on that same report. Welcome.
Kia ora tātou. So my name is Fiona and I currently live in Herwood, but I used to live on Gambia Street, so I know these streets very well. I just got a toe talk with the previous speakers, David, was it Susan? So toe talk with David and Susan because they've raised very good points and I agree with them. I was going to raise similar points to Susan about the Gambia Frank Street area and the fact that it needs to be 30. It's so narrow, and for it to function like it should have in the living streets, it needs to be 30. People who through there and no one gives way to anyone. So having lived there, it was very scary, especially if you've got children and people, lots of kids walk to school in that area, scooter to school, when they're just getting across the road is very dangerous because people don't indicate, you don't know where they're going. You just have to take your life in your hands, basically. The other one was Main North, Papanui and Herwood roads. I would really like to see them reduced. So I was glad to see additional streets included and the schools, some of them permanent, some of them temporarily reduced to 30. So thank you staff for including those streets and for reducing them further. But I would like to see more 30k zones, and definitely the main streets, the arterial roads need to be reduced. As per my report, out to at least Sales Street to include the rest homes on Hewitt Road, down to Blythe on Papanui to include all those shops and the medical centre and the dentist and everyone along there. And then up to St Joe's would be great for Main North Road, because it is that Lakes Meadow Street area is very hairy, especially for cyclists. I don't know how else the traffic planners could make that safer for everyone, but reducing the speed would be a good start. I know that obviously the infrastructure may not support it at the moment, and that's a barrier. There's no budget to put infrastructure in to indicate the appropriate speed, but certainly at least as far as Sawyer's Arms, ideally further, especially around St Joe's. And if we're going to get a temporary 30k zone around that Lakes Meadow Street area, would be a minimum for me. Basically that's it.
Thanks, Fiona. Ali, for a question.
Are you confident that by putting in slower streets and signage that it would work? I mean, something I'm constantly raising is enforcement. And also I understand that there are some studies that show putting signage up after a while, people seeing it every day become desensitised to it and just behave in whatever way they want to behave. So my question to you is, are you confident that it would work? How important is enforcement, do you think?
I think enforcement is definitely needed at the start, because people currently ignore the 30k sign straight out here on Langdon's and Citizen Drive, for example. But the bigger the area that's covered by slow speed, the more likely you'll get compliance. And obviously, as these slow speeds roll out across the city, people will eventually realise that they can't go 50 anywhere. Or 60 anywhere. So I think we just have to start with what we've got, and as we roll these out, it will become more second nature for people just to go a bit slower, or to go, actually it's faster to bike than most of us bike, which would be ideal. We want mode shift.
Yeah, just one more to that. When you're talking about areas to reduce the speed, are you considering what is already in place from a PT perspective, from a cycleway perspective? Because as I mentioned before in Dave's, what we're hearing, and as you've referred to, the infrastructural costs related to doing this is huge. But from a strategic perspective and looking at the whole thing rather than going, let's do 30 here, 30 here, oh, by the way, that's a PT. I mean, are you, it doesn't sound, with respect, that you're looking at it in an area-wide strategic way and what's available in the whole area?
Well, certainly looking at corridors and things like that. Yeah. Certainly we need to be, looking at where we can put those corridors in, and getting, like we tried to do with the central city, right? Trying to get cars off Manchester Street totally didn't work. But trying to reinforce that, it's like we've got to roll it out the whole city. Otherwise people will just keep doing what they've always done. The status quo will continue. So looking for those opportunities and making the arterial routes more attractive to get the quiet streets that we wanted in the first place. So there's a bit of traffic flow design that needs to happen.
Simon.
Thanks, Fiona. I just wanted to check your thinking too on Sawyer's Arms Road.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. I wanted that reduced at least to the railway line. So again, there's a cycleway, Papanui parallel goes up to the railway line, sadly it doesn't go any further. But the domain gets very busy. I biked through there last night and it was the quietest I've seen it, but normally there's heaps of people there with sports practice. The lights were on, but nobody was there. Lots of sports practice and lots of people going to the mall or going to Graham Condon or likewise.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you very much.
Your time. And our final deputation today is Joanna Gould, who is going to speak to our area report and more specifically the memo on Shirley Road. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, I'm just here to update the board about the research and ideas I've done for 10 Shirley Road, the Shirley Community Reserve site. The email that I sent you last night highlights 4 different posts that I've got on my website. The first one is about what I provided for the annual plan, but the information is basically the research. The concepts are on page 7 is learning libraries, and on page 8 the Shirley Centre concept, and on page 9 in-store demonstration concept. And it's basically the why behind what I want at 10 Shirley Road. The next link that I'll provide you with is the Shirley Centre concept, and this is more in detailed. There's 12 pages that I wrote last year that goes into an overview of the history behind 10 Shirley Road. Then it talks about the location and why that's important, and then the district plan, site history, the original building and the current community facilities, and then more detail into my concept for learning libraries. And then there's design considerations, design inspiration, building ideas and landscape ideas. And the third link that I've shared with you is my Facebook page and community group that I've got for Shirley Centre 10 Shirley Road. I'm basically updating that every day with information, sharing posts that I find interesting that I think the community will find interesting as well. It's a bit of a community notice board as well, so there for discussion if people would like. And the last link is for the South Library report that I did a deputation last, I can't remember when it was, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it seems like ages. But this goes into all the details of why it's important for the Shirley Library to be updated and why I would like it relocated and upgraded to the 10 Shirley Road site. And then I've asked 4 questions about the potential for this site to be, I've just got to find it, to be transformed into an emergency operations centre when needed from a civil defence point of view. And then the second thing is that the South Library had funding from the Ministry of Education for help with their community, and my concern is that there's already issues in our community surrounding 10 Shirley Road, and it would be nice if we could work with the Ministry of Ed to get some sort of help and learning assistance closer to our communities. And the third comment is about George Pennington, because he was the Ministry of Education back then. He was their main architect, and there's lots of buildings in Christchurch, school buildings that because of him. So I'm wondering if the council, community board and the Ministry of Ed can work together to basically do something to honour his legacy, and especially across the road from Shirley Primary School as well. I think it would be nice to put some of his history back into the community, because we've lost so much with all the buildings being demolished after the earthquakes. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Elaine?
Thank you. No, I think that's really interesting, wanting to honour the history of the original architect. Yeah. Would you think that a signboard would be a good way to do that?
Yes, but he also was way ahead of his times. He actually created the open air schools. And so there's features that he created all those years ago that could actually be used to make the library building, or whatever building it is, to be more healthier for all people that use it. So there's some design features that I think would be really nice to actually incorporate into the building, not just have the history of who he is and what he did in Christchurch.
Okay, that's great. So look at his work and try and pull the benefits out that could apply to a potential new building. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Joanna, I just wanted to I just wanted to ask you, had you thought, because it's just something that came across my mind the other day, about the inequality that has been going on in the Shirley area and in regards to community spaces and facilities over the years?
Yes.
So do you agree that there's been a lack of?
Yes, there has. From what I've researched, there's been plans drawn up by Lucas Associates. There was a huge document produced, and you read through that document and very little of it has been put into play in Shirley community, and suffered because of it.
Okay, so because I agree with that. So my question is around putting all the facilities on that one site, is that adding enough to the community, or should all the things that you're talking about be several sites? Like, are you sort of taking second best by putting it all together as one?
I don't think so, because that site is so historic and it's so visual in our community. It's the easiest site to get to in our community from public transport point of view. I came when I was living in Riccarton, I came across to the site to do antenatal classes. So it's not just a site that is helps the surrounding communities, it's a site that could help so many different people who are stuck at home during the daytime, who don't have anywhere else to go. It's my idea for it is an inclusive, accessible space for everybody to enjoy, and the learning libraries concept is to bring the support services, like I talk about on my Facebook pages all the time, about it being identity, wellbeing and learning, and getting community education and support services onto a site that everybody can easily access.
Yes, and I've, you know, like, absolutely fantastic. But when you're taking, so basically you're taking one community space or two community spaces
and putting them together
and putting them all on one.
Because I
So
don't
is that
think,
a loss?
no, I don't think so. If you've seen the photos from my point of view of the Shirley Library, you're looking into a concrete car park. From community wellbeing point of view, it's destroying our community. Having to go into a car parking building to actually get to our learning facility, the only place that we've got.
I agree with you that that place is.
And so
not the
from my
best,
point of
but-
view, is put it in a place that it is in the Dudley Creek area. There's, you know, beautiful landscaping there. They've spent heaps of money on the Dudley Creek. It's a nice walk to Richmond along the footpath that they've created. There's just so much going for it, and so many people know that spot. They are familiar with that place, so they'll go to that place.
But as far as equitable outcomes,
yeah,
you're taking two spaces in the community,
yeah,
and you're dropping one.
Yeah, but I think we'll build a better building on site that caters for everybody.
Yeah, could I just please signal that in the members' information that I craft a resolution around just getting some information around an engineering report for Shirley Library?
Yep, we can increase that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So just remind me.
Yep, Simon?
Thanks, Joanna. Just a quick one. I don't seem to have had an email from you. I'm not sure if you sent it.
Mark just forwarded it through.
Okay. My question is the 10 Shirley Road site large enough to accommodate a building, large enough to accommodate all the ideas?
Yeah, that's why I suggest making it at least 2-storey. I think if you take over, I've looked at the site so many times. My thinking from last year was different to get the car parking on the site, but because of the visualness of the site that you can see it both directions, I think you should just take car parking away and make the building go from the playground basically to the fence line. So it's a wider building. It doesn't necessarily have to go as far back, but you could put a few car parks at the back. There's plenty of off-street car parking as well. And visually, it's more prominent from a point of view. It's easier to see, and then you're not looking at car parks. You're looking at a building that hopefully, from my point of view, should be quite eye-catching, because not only of George Penlington, those ideas go ahead, but the Dudley character area, I'd love it to have some kind of character, so it's not a modern building, but fits in with the character of that area.
The old building was enormous.
Oh, it was, yeah.
The vacant land doesn't look as
Yeah, it
good as
looks
actually
tiny,
is.
and at the meeting that we had recently, there was questions about the size as well. And if you actually pick up the size of the current library, what I highlighted, there's only a small square of the actual library in the Shirley Library and Service Centre, because the rest is taken up by the Service Centre or the governance team. So the actual physical space, the actual floor space that the library consists of currently is quite small, like it's less than half of that current building. So as far as I'm concerned, that easily fits on that site and more. So it's like, well, we're going to gain more than what we're currently got, and we'll hopefully get a better selection of library books and learning spaces that we don't have at the current library, which is causing our community to go without, because we don't have a Kids First program, we don't have after school programs that our kids are able to get to easily. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Ellie, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Joanna, are you frustrated by the process, and what do you think when you hear that we are now considering consulting further to see what should be on that side?
I've been doing this for 4 years. I mean, I've been here since 2018 saying, why have we not got a plan? Why haven't we made some progress? And then I look back and like I research and I find all these people, other people in the community who have been asking the same thing since 2012 when the building, the former building was demolished, and people have been signing petitions, they've been doing submissions, they're doing consultations, and nothing changes. And I'm really frustrated because even today, you know, I was invited to turn up, and even today it's a frustrating process just trying to engage with you guys and trying to have meetings with you guys and discuss. Like, you get 10 minutes.
Is there a split in the community on what is wanted on that land?
There are so many splits because there's so many different social groups in the community, and there's a disconnect between the different types of people, the different types of personalities.
So how do we overcome that?
That's why I think making it a basic space, like I don't, like I look at the building as just a shell. What you put into it is the people, not the actual structures. Like there's room, like I don't want it to have a teenage section and older person section. I want it to be spaces that anybody could come into and use the space for whatever means or purpose that they want to. And it's not just, you know, labelled as something that everybody belongs, and it's not, you don't fit in unless you meet this criteria.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
So just, Joanne, at least the good thing is that in our area report, a building and a community centre is now one of the options that's going to be in the business. I think it's huge progress. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming and speaking to us today. We have got your email with all those links.
Right.
And we do appreciate all the work you're putting in,
thanks
the hours and hours that you're putting into your research. And we look forward to working with you and the Shirley Road Central group moving forward with this feasibility. Thank you. Item 6, there are no petitions, so we'll move to item 7, which is the slow speed neighbourhood Papanui. So welcome staff to the table with that one.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Gemma. I'm the Senior Transportation Engineer in Operations at Council. With me, I have Charlotte French, who's our expert on speed management, and Hannah Valentine, who's our engagement advisor. Charlotte will just give us another run through on the why and the project, and then Hannah will give us a run through on the consultation and what we've done since then.
Thank you, everyone. So you've seen us before, and so this is no huge surprise, the reasons why we're doing this, but just to quickly summarise, it's all aligning with Road to Zero, which is the national strategy for reducing death and serious injuries. And speed management is just one piece of the puzzle to try and get to our targets of more closely a 40% reduction in these death and serious injuries by 2030. And the scope of this project is really tackling the neighbourhood speed limits within Christchurch City, and we've gone through a bit of a process to identify those neighbourhoods initially that we really think will benefit from this most. Papanui was one of these, and the benefits that sit there for neighbourhoods or reducing speed in neighbourhoods is more than just that safety. That is a big part of the reason, but it's along the lines of creating a more livable community space, reducing noise, connectivity, improving connectivity for pedestrians and the likes of. So that's some of the why. And I guess what's happened, it's been quite an eventful few months for the speed management process. You may or may not be aware, but we talked to you about a rule change that was coming last time we met that has arrived. And so the rule changed in May the 19th, which was fantastic. It allowed us a lot more freedom and flexibility in what we're able to do with speed management. And so we've been able to make some really key changes to our proposal. So hopefully that gives you more confidence, and now that we're actually able to respond to this request from the public and actually make some real tangible change.
Sorry, can you tell us exactly what the change?
Yes, absolutely. So the key, I guess more holistically, the changes to the speed management at a government level, probably three key changes. First change is that instead of doing these piecemeal approaches to speed changes in very isolated sections, we are now putting together speed management plans. So this will be a much more network approach, and people, the public yourselves, will be able to see what we're doing over a long period of time and we'll be consulting you at once, rather than this very individualised locations, which we're only able to do under the old rule. So that will make a lot more sense in terms of the messaging. The plan is essentially to do, the plan is essentially to do a short-term plan, so that will be covering this next year and a half, which we will be coming in August to present to you in more details. So this one is just kind of sitting in this transitional phase where we're on the old rule and now we're in the new rule. But once this one
can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So the old rule is what we started the consultation on for this project, which is why it's a very piecemeal and it's not part of the wider plan. Now that we're moving into the new rule, we just have to tie the loose ends off. We have to get this one finished. And then the next time you see us will be a much broader plan which spans the entire city, where we'll be going to the individual communities.
Why would we be tying it up when we could look at it in a broader sense in another?
Because we've already consulted on this one, so we just have to kind of get it through.
Will it align with the
Yes, absolutely, absolutely will align. So this what we're proposing here gets overlaid on top of our wider plan and make sure that everything lines in nicely and ties in. This will allow us to essentially give a better idea to the public as to why we're doing some of the changes that we're doing here and broadening that out. So that's the intent of speed management. The old rule didn't allow us to do this. This new rule does now. So that's probably the key change from a more resource perspective. At a technical level, schools is probably the very big change, which is a huge positive change. We're now able to go to 30 km per hour outside schools, and that is actually the intent for all schools. We have a target of hitting our top 40% schools by the end of 2024 to have appropriate 30 km treatments. Whether that is permanent or variable speed limit will depend on the nature of the road outside the school. Permanent is the ideal, but acknowledging that in some places that won't always be available to us. So that will be the decisions and the discussions that will come from these sessions and the plan. The other, probably less more important change, it more affects at a technical level and a monitoring level. In the past, we were in a bit of a chicken and the egg situation where if we didn't have the infrastructure, we couldn't make the change to the limit. Now that rule has been removed, it allows us a bit more flexibility to at least get in there and make a speed change where appropriate. I will accentuate the term where appropriate. We still want to apply the principles of putting the correct speed limit for the environment. Otherwise, things start getting a bit less credible to the public. And I'll just allude to the point that was very rightly made by Ali around how if the effect of complacency, once you start having limits there for a while, people start to get comfortable, and that is really the importance of why we need to make sure the limit we put on the road is credible for the infrastructure. What this does, however, this removal of the rule that restricted us in this space, it gives us the ability to, in those grey zones where it could be this or it could be that, and we're kind of sitting on the fence, it allows us to go with the lower speed first, monitor, see how it performs, and then if it's not performing, then we can go back and find the infrastructure to make that suit. So those are the three key changes at a more government level, and how those have now since been implemented. Those principles have been implemented to the proposal from Papanui.
And sorry, just one more question on that. Was it around the schools? So all streets around schools?
Yes, so
and 30 kilometres.
That's the intent, yeah. So we still have to apply the standard constructability and also the standard principles of where the signs can go for visibility and sight distances and that kind of thing. They still will have to go ahead, but the old principles were very much, it's just the fronting, a single street that was fronting the school would be addressed. Now it's very much a zone approach. So it's considering that kids and students arrive at the school from various angles. So you'll note in our current proposal is more of a zone around the school that's being addressed by 30 kilometres per hour, which is much more in alignment with the safe system principles.
And it is 30, not 40.
Absolutely, outside schools is 30. Absolutely, yeah. The only intent times where you might see a 40 or even a 60 would be more in those rural school environments where you have much faster permanent speed limits, such as 100 kilometres or 80 kilometre zone, where 100 to 30 is considered an unsafe deceleration because it's only a short period of time. And those are now the exception. We have to justify why those are an exception. And the old rule was the other way around. That was the standard and 30s were the exception. So that is a really important switch that has been made, which I think will be really, very beneficial and really supportive of the community wants and needs, I think. So that was really just the generic changes at a more holistic level. I'll hand over to Hannah to talk more about the specifics.
You can pop to the next slide, please. So originally we consulted on 40 kilometres an hour for the majority of streets. And next slide. So we had 82 submissions, 77% said that they were clearly for these changes. The themes that came out of it, the major one was we want more. So that was either extending the 40 kilometre area past the boundaries that we originally put, or lowering some of those 40 streets to 30. In addition to that, people wanted more traffic calming measures and enforcement by police and cameras. So if you go to the next slide, as a result of this feedback as well as the new rule, we made the changes shown, which was extending that 40 kilometre zone to Mays Road, Rutland Street, and the streets bound by Mays, Rutland, Papanui-Innes. We talked to Waipapa about it this week, and they approved it. They will recommend to council that it gets approved. It's in the zone currently. And
Unanimous?
Yeah, it was very positive.
Yes.
And then, as discussed, those 30 zones around schools. Through that, so every time we change a street, we have to notify every resident by something in their mailbox. So we sent out a letter to those who were going to have a new change again, so the new 40 zones, and the individuals who live on the ones that are going from 40 to 30. From that, I heard back from about 20 residents, and only 2 said that they were unhappy with the changes. Not that it's a numbers game, but there was overwhelming support with those new changes from residents as well.
Can I just ask, the blue's 50, is it?
The blue is 40.
And orange is 30.
Orange is 30 and the dash green is existing.
Okay, so it's staying at 40 outside St Joseph's.
Where it's got a variable speed limit. Up the top, you can see the little dash line.
There's an existing variable speed limit outside St Joseph's on Bates Road, and we propose to replace that to 30 kilometres an hour as a variable speed limit.
During school times,
Yes,
right, okay.
Which we can now extend also to cover things like breakfast club or after school activities.
And is that done by active signage? Is it? Okay.
A feedback again, what we heard was enforcement. Since this was brought up earlier, I just wanted to talk about a conversation that's currently happening behind the scenes while we're developing this speed management plan. Is we're talking with police on a better way of working going forward, because currently we notify them of speed changes and request that they do a little bit more monitoring in the area, but at the end of the day it's up to them what they do. But we're developing a good working relationship with police who work in that speed monitoring zone about some way to do it going forward, because it's really hard to say to residents, sorry, it's not a problem. We tried. So we are currently thinking it might be a feedback to us within the 3 months following, and we can pass that feedback on specifically to someone who really is going to work in the space. But yeah, so it is something that staff are working on behind the scenes, because we need to make sure that residents are happy that the speeds that we're setting are going to be enforced.
I have a couple of things to add.
Great.
So I just want to thank those who came to new positions. It's really, really helpful for us as technical advisors to hear that feedback, and we are thankfully able to actually apply a lot of your suggestions. So just addressing those now. So the variable speed limit on Main North Road for St Joseph's we can implement. So we'll be looking at locations for that. It might not be as long as you would normally see, just there are some limitations in the area. With constructability, there's a lot going on Main North Road, particularly with that intersection just north of St Joseph's, but we fully acknowledge the concerns for Main North Road and safety around that school. So more than happy to accommodate those. The other mention was including the 30-kilometre extension at Sawyer's Arms. We are happy to do that, acknowledging that that will just be a 30-kilometre start just before, I think, is that Bristol Street?
Sissons Drive.
Sissons Drive, so just on the right-hand side of Sissons Drive, which is a key change point in terms of how the road looks. We can't pull it back at this time to Main North Road. We are restricted by law. The Speed Management Rule 2022 has a clause in there that states that the road controlling authority must be satisfied that the point on the road at which the speed limit changes is or at close to a point of obvious change in the roadside development. So if it was at the location of the intersection, there's no clear change there, but much further down, closer to the school, there absolutely is a clear change point there. So happy to extend that 30 to Sawyer's Arm to capture up to the railway line, which is an access for the school as well. So that is a change that we're definitely happy to make, and that would be a permanent 30 kilometres per hour. The other point I would like to raise is the extension of the Maze Road. So we're happy to acknowledge the change point for the Maze Road could be brought further down to, I will just acknowledge, so not to set a precedent unexpectedly, we are not obliged under the rule to put 30-kilometre speed limits outside preschools, and the reason for that is because they are considered to be usually brought into the preschool by their parents or driven in and dropped off. And so the primary reason why we're able to pull this back is for the comments around that change point and pulling that back to a bit more of a logical location. It is very fortuitous that in this case the preschool is also captured, but just wanted to make it clear that the preschool is not the reason why we're doing that, just so we don't set a precedent there unintentionally.
Can I just ask quickly around that? There's no reason why you couldn't look at that across the city, though, is there? As including preschools, just because
it's actually, so we wouldn't actually be able to put 30 kilometres outside preschools by the definition that they're not considered a school. So where we can put 30 kilometres outside schools is written into the rule, as it can only be put outside a school. If this preschool is sitting in an area which is going to go to 30k for various other reasons, then absolutely we'll drop it. But if you have an isolated preschool in an area that is not fit for 30Ks, if that was a primary school, for example, where kids are expected to be potentially walking on their own on the side of the roads and not be dropping off into the actual area, by law, we have to reduce that to 30 now.
Have you ever raised it with central government, or has it been raised through the council that should change, because that's like a nonsense, right?
Yes, I'm sure it's been discussed. I don't have an order.
Yeah, no, that's an unfair question. But I mean, it's totally illogical when you've got preschool kids that'll run out without a parent. That's even more of a reason to have them around outside preschools if you can, right?
Well, preschools are also a very big part of education.
Yeah.
Education doesn't start at school.
So if what you're saying is if there's another reason you can hang that on, we're good to go.
We're absolutely. Absolutely. There's definitely the intent is where we can find those abilities to extend that is absolutely the intent, because from a technical perspective, yes, I completely agree.
Pauline, Simon, I've got your questions. We'll just let Hannah finish first though.
The other was just to confirm that 30-kilometre extension down to just north of Maze Road, we're absolutely able to accommodate. Unfortunately, we are not able to accommodate pulling it down below Maze Road. The reason for that is you would then experience a very awkward change position when you're travelling through. So Maze Road, we ever talked about before, initially we were unable to lower it to 40, thankfully with the change of the rule, we're unable to accommodate that. However, Maze Road is still considered a risk for compliance. If we were to extend 30 further down, we would then have to consider lowering Maze as well from A to 30 from a consistency perspective. Otherwise, you're having a very quick succession of change points from 40s to 30s to 40s, which will lead to confusion and lack of credibility on the network. So we are only able to limit that to just capture two, but hopefully that is still an acceptable compromise for and change of our plans there. Those are the key changes. I'm pretty sure that was mentioned. Yes, correct. So those, though, just based on what we heard today, more than happy to accommodate those.
Can you just quickly go over, we have just been sent that email that had the staff response to when Ellie raised it, but
Yes.
the reasoning behind not lowering main north end.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just clearly quite acknowledge that we actually, from a technical perspective, we completely agree that the appropriate limit speed for Main North Road in that activity centre is 30 kilometres an hour. The key thing that we have to know is the scope of this project is to address local residential streets. The activity street that, or the Main North Road section is what we call an activity street on an arterial road. The messaging and the reasoning behind it is quite different. And what we are planning, and now that the rule has changed, we are actually in the process of developing this, but the speed management plan for 2024 and 2027, all the way through to 2027, will capture those main road activity streets that sit on arterial roads, and they will be able to, we will in that case be able to address funding issues so that we can maybe look at putting the appropriate infrastructure as well at the same time as lowering that speed limit. So it fully acknowledged the concerns and we agree with them. That is very much, it is not an appropriate limit through Main North Road at 50 right now. It's just for this project right now, we're just pulling back. We're waiting, getting the streets that we know we can do and within the legal remit. I'll acknowledge that the clause 6.3 for the speed rule states that we have to set a road controlling authority must be satisfied that the limit is safe and appropriate having regard to the function and use of the road, the numbers and type of road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists and mopeds, the characteristics of the road, adjacent land use and any other matter the road controlling authority considers relevant to public safety. So under that clause, we have to consider the fact that it's more than just cyclists and pedestrians that use this area. It is also freight, it is also commuters, and lowering it to 30 at this time without that appropriate infrastructure, particularly for night use, could potentially lead to inappropriate use of that speed limit and non-compliance. So it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of not doing it ever. It's just a matter of we're not able to do it right now, but it is coming. And with the new rule change, that is very much more realistic time frame now. So hopefully that addresses those concerns.
Thank you. Simon had a question and Pauline.
Yeah, mine's been answered. Thanks.
Okay. Simon,
Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. You've answered 2 of my 3 questions just by letting you finish, so I appreciate that. My final question is just a process one, just checking if staff have some advice, if the board would have a mind to support these accommodations that you've listed, given that we've got some very specific resolutions that mention how many metres change points are, etc., how to proceed with this so we can get it, or at least so that council can make a final decision on it and get it all nailed in one go.
I'll let Gemma answer it. I would probably need some help from my governance manager or community board advisor. There would be 2 resolutions that would need to be changed at the end of the report. So ZZZZ and AAAAA to cover Rutland Street. And then we would need 2 new resolutions for the variable speed limit at St Joseph's on Main North Road and the one on Sissons. Sways House Road, because they would just be brand new resolutions. So we could draft them while we're here and send them through if that's easiest.
Thank you.
Great. Mike.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation and it's so good to see the changes evolve so quickly. So a couple of things that I guess come out of this this whole process was a few other issues were identified. Like I think there's one where they talked about coming out of Tulloch Street onto what's the street on Pallowell, and the fact that there was a lot of issues with visibility with a car park there. Also, what Dave was talking about, the coming off Main North Road and going footpath and coming off in cars. So I'm just wondering, those issues that are identified through this process, what do we do with them that sort of fall outside of your scope, but actually need to be looked at to make sure they are addressed? Are they picked up and passed on to the transport team?
Yep, so that I sit within the operations team and they get relayed to the area engineers. And then we would ask them to investigate and come back to the board if there's any recommendations. But I guess it doesn't close it out, which we could look at doing. With Ainsley Terrace over in Central Inwood Heathcote, we're having a site visit because of some parking issues that were identified through the Slow Speed Neighbourhood program. So we do try to get back to those ones to investigate them further. If there isn't any recommendation to do anything, I guess that's what isn't fed back. So we could look at a process to try and feed that back
Yeah, and I guess I don't want to do it today, but I guess as a board, it'd be good to have a look at some of those issues just so we can identify them and make sure they are being followed up. So the other thing that's really good to like the new rules around speech management are fantastic. Mostly, it's concerned about one thing, but that's fine. But in terms of going out wider, because one of the things we did hear a lot from was other areas. Like you put this in one area and suddenly you get the other communities that we want to. So St. James, having around that area is very, very clear. And so I understand therefore that's going to come back in the wider program.
Yes, so the intent would be by the end of, I believe, at 2030, the entirety of the city will be addressed with these principles.
Okay, and how do we prioritise that?
So the way that they've been prioritised is through we've used a matrix, a 2x2 matrix assessment, which captures a combination of safety, engagement, feedback, and also potential future costs. It was done at a very high level, and that was what was used to determine which of the 5 we did first, which is one of these. And essentially this, for example, Papanui scored highly on all 3 categories in the sense that it had good safety outcomes, it has a high number of schools. There was no community support for a design for a speed change in this area, and then the cost was considered quite low considering the area did not require too much infrastructure at this time. So those are some of the things we considered when trying to prioritise things. That was back, we were definitely under the old rule where we only did 5 at a time. Now we've got the new rule, the ability to go beyond just 5 is considerably greater. We do have to stay within the remit of our funding. That's probably our only limitation. At the end of the day, this does cost money. So we're going through a process right now of identifying about 10, maybe 11 future areas for the next 1.5 years. And we're just going through a bit of a costing exercise to make sure that that's actually feasible before we go out to the public and tell them what the plan is for the next 1.5 years. And then beyond that, it'll be a 3-year plan. Because the 3-year plan for 2024, 2027 lines up with funding cycles a bit better, it gives us the ability to actually ask for the funding that we need to get what we want done. At the moment, we're kind of halfway through an existing funding cycle, so we just have to work with what we've got. Gina, do you want to expand on that, or is that pretty much?
I think
that's pretty much the reasoning behind it.
So you will go to council and say this is the cost that we'll do X amount, but if you want to do more cost to actually allow councils actually want to do this quicker than say 2030.
Yeah, it really can. We'll know what the end result. It does come down to resourcing as well, but hopefully with the new rule, we'll just be consulting at one time, so that takes a whole bunch of time constraints out. And theoretically, for example, year 1, year 2, once we've consulted, I believe
late October.
Late October, there we go. That will be once we get those through, get those approved collectively, it will give us about a year to just get out there and get them done without having to go backwards and forwards. The intent of the new speed management plans is to try and streamline the process a little bit in terms of that consultation. It does put a little bit more hard yards right at the start to make sure that we have those discussions, bring people along the journey, create that public sentiment. But once we've got that approved, it's just a matter of spending the rest of the time that we have to get it out there and get it done.
Sorry, one last question.
Sorry,
it's on this.
Okay. Only if the chair allows you though.
Just once, guys. I didn't hear in how you're going to line it up, what's going to come first. Did I hear you mention that you looked into the areas where speeding and the road design and so forth was causing the most number of accidents? Is that coming into it as well?
So it's not quite accident based. So when we address our prioritisation, we do look at the accidents and we really try to focus on where we can make the biggest difference in speed change first. But it's not the only thing we look at. We also look at that community intent and that community desire, how the community is evolving, the development of the area. So, for example, we're looking at a number of subdivisions as prioritising those because those have been designed for the lower limits, so they're quite nice ones just to get done. But then we also have the higher risk sections, areas which really do need addressing, such as Papanui, which we're aware of has had a number of incidences over the last 10 years. So that's, at the end of the day, we're absolutely getting as many done as we possibly can in the resources and timing that we have available, but we don't want to also make a mistake and rush things too quickly and do things in improper places. So it's a balanced approach, and places with schools are absolutely getting prioritised. Schools, we have to hit the top 40% by end of next year. End of 2024. Yeah, end of 2024, sorry, apologies. So that anywhere with high volumes of schools are absolutely going to get prioritised. And then areas such as the more rural ones, which have a bit more challenging conversations, might be pushed down into the later plans. So those are the kind of principles, but everything's getting addressed and assessed as an individual entity and then brought into the plan, and making sure that everything coherently speaks to each other and makes sense to the public.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, you might. Thanks. Actually, I have another question. Just on that. So, to my understanding, though, is if there's any schools in the category one, basically all across just up in the rural areas, if they're currently not 40, they have to be brought down to 30.
Yes.
It's only the ones that are currently 40 that you'll have a little bit longer to do that.
Yeah.
So my other question. So we heard a few submissions and deputations about that area around Gambia and Mary and all that, how actually it's designed to be actually really slow, particularly I'm not making it 40, but making it 30, apologies that you actually spoke about this earlier. What were your thoughts on that, actually bringing that down to a lower?
So I will, the intent, I guess, for the future intent, so maybe even beyond 2030, would essentially to have be 30 kilometres on all neighbourhood streets. But I'll acknowledge the discussion that was held around social licence and building that acceptance of behaviour. If we were to go to 30 on those streets, that there are a few streets, so Gambia, Frank Street, the likes of those, they are narrow, but not all streets in that little block are like that. So we kind of have to go with the lower common denominator in that sense, that if we went to 30 now on all those streets, we might actually see non-compliance, there might be frustration, the behaviours may be negative. If we can get them to 40 now, build that understanding, build that social licence, that behavioural paradigm shift, then we can go back again in the future and then lower it down to that desired 30 state. It's a bit more of a staged approach just to build that social licence and that understanding of the why we're doing this. There's been experiences, particularly on state highways, where they've probably gone a bit too hard, too fast on some of their speed reductions, where they didn't have the social licence, and there hasn't gone quite as well as they had hoped, and those behavioural issues are a real problem. We don't want that on our local streets where we don't have the ability to have that enforcement as much as we would like, say, when you can on state highways. So doing the 40 Ks now is still a reduction in the 50, we'll still see benefits. And a lot of those streets that are designed for 30 right now already operate at 30. And so a speed limit isn't actually going to change much there. Frank Street and Gambia, I can't speak much to the intersection design. Gemma wanted to talk to that.
We can take that back, or it can be actioned through the board to have those intersections. But the ones immediately around Christchurch Adventist School will become permanent 30. So I think that does cover those little streets. And it will have the Kyoto school sign, so it tells people why they're travelling at 30 on those little local streets around the Adventist school.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. You talked about a sort of wide strategic thing here, things talking to each other, blah, blah, blah. Have you considered, or do you consider when you look at these reductions, what the traffic flow is going to be? Because congestion is a huge issue. I said before, I don't have a problem going 30 or 40, but I do get very frustrated, as others do, stopping and starting and sitting in lines of traffic, when actually at 30 or 40 you could be flying. I mean, running down, I think it's Montreal, not Montreal, what's the other one way into town?
Durham Street.
Durham, going down Durham. I mean, what a bloody nightmare. And if that was actually 30, it is 40 down there.
It's not be going down.
Durham Street's 30.
I have a car and need to go into town in my car. So going down there, if the traffic lights were actually phased properly, you get a flow. So with these lowering of speeds, especially on obviously streets with traffic lights, do you take that into consideration?
Absolutely. So I'll probably rephrase taking into consideration. It's not something we consider when it's applying a limit. The limit has the areas and what it feels and what it looks like, but a very positive outcome of having consistent speed network across the city is an improvement on congestion. Because of that exact thing, that free flow speed continually allows people to trickle through rather than stop-start. It also potentially can impact and improve on the climate emissions. The acceleration-deceleration is known to create more emissions. So that's, once again, not a primary reason we do it. It's just a very positive benefit. When we think that traffic light phasing comment is probably more directed towards arterials, that's where we typically see those traffic lights. So when we're looking at local roads per se, there isn't usually many traffic lights to phase. But Rutland Street, how that has got the cycleway on it, so that will have been designed for a lower limit anyway. I can't say for sure, I wasn't part of that project, but I would imagine that was definitely taken consideration. If we do lower a limit where there are traffic lights in the area, so for example a CBD limit, then the traffic signalling definitely gets an assessment, because those are designed for a certain design speed, and if we change that design speed, then they will need to be reviewed. The phasing of lights is one of the tools that we have in the toolkit to at least create improved compliance. Where it's I guess able to be used really depends on how the network and the lights and phasing is designed, which I'm not an expert in, so I can't really speak more to that. But it is definitely a consideration. We're fortunate in the neighbourhood streets that we don't tend to have many traffic lights that we have to deal with or have to amend. But rest assured that if that does happen, we do that assessment as part of our proposal. Thanks.
Emma? I was just going to I was just going to comment on being a person who is now living in a 40k zone, has been for quite a while, I don't know, 2 years. And I really noticed the difference in my area. The speed is lower. There are still people doing crazy things on the roads, but let's give them all time to improve their behaviours. And I noticed that when I go outside my little 40k area, I find the roads fast. So I'm noticing the difference that is made. And I also noticed the difference in having conversations with people and their attitude. So the locals who live around it see the benefits of it, and they start controlling it themselves. So they are actually, instead of thinking that speeding car behind me is going to crash into me, so I'll go faster, they don't change their 40k. You notice that they don't change going from 40k to accommodate the person who is right behind them with their hand on the horn.
Yes.
So there's real positive changes coming from the people themselves and the actual.
It's great to hear that, and I think that will really aid in building that social licence. The more that we start to see these rolled out into the streets of Christchurch, people will start to acknowledge it. And the dream state for myself in this space would be that people just know in 10 years from now that if you're in a residential street, it's 40 k's an hour. Very much like right now, you know that if you're in an urban area, it's 50, and that will be a paradigm shift. But this is really beneficial steps, I think, and the new rule change is going to revolutionise this. I think it's fantastic to see.
Just one more quick question from me. So can you just confirm the Sawyer's Arms section that you said you can accommodate? So that would start on the northwest side of the System Drive intersection.
It would,
on the domain side.
It would be just prior before getting to Systems Road. So you'd have the change point and then Systems Road and then the school. Because that ties in nicely to the existing 30 kilometres that's on Systems Road at the moment.
And that would be 30.
It'll be permanent 30, correct.
Okay.
Sorry, just going back. Did we work out why? Did we hear? Sorry, why on? Did we work out why on Sawyer's Arms Road up past the mall that's saying 50? Did we talk about that?
That's the bit we've acknowledged we're able to change.
Oh, sorry, to 30 road and school. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a very small section right at the start, just off you turn. As you turn off Main North Road, which we're unable to accommodate just because of the change point issues, because it is still quite wide, and once you get, it's only a matter of like 100 metres, I think.
So we wouldn't get to 50.
You wouldn't get to 50. So, and I'll acknowledge that when we do get to the time of being able to change Main North Road and addressing those infrastructure issues, it would be very likely that would just become a full 30 zone. But right now, we just have to stay within the remit of what we're legally able to do. So, from a technical perspective.
Right, we are going to have to adjourn for a minute while we come up with those extra resolutions. We will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Yeah, thanks for that great presentation.
Very good.
Could we put some